Welcome, traveler of thought. Step quietly into the silent empire where the echoes of forgotten civilizations flow gently into your mind, guiding you into reflection, insight, and serene understanding as you drift deeper into sleep. In the twilight between sleep and consciousness, the past begins to breathe. You find yourself standing at the edge of the Tigris, the river flowing silently beneath a sky painted with stars unknown to modern maps. The city of Babylon rises in the distance, not merely as stone and mortar, but as an echo of human ambition, dreams, and hubris. The air carries a subtle vibration, a resonance that speaks not to the ears, but to the soul itself. The walls of Babylon stretch high, crowned with gates adorned in lapis lazuli and gold. Lions march along the Ishtar Gate, frozen in eternal procession, eyes glittering with stories of conquest, devotion, and the pursuit of immortality. Here, in the hush of night, you can feel the pulse of a civilization, not in the lives of its inhabitants, now long gone, but in the memory embedded within its stones. As you step forward, the ground beneath your feet hums with the weight of centuries. Each footfall stirs echoes of markets, temples, and palaces. Traders calling out their wares, children laughing in the courtyards, priests whispering prayers that reach to the heavens. Though silent now, these echoes are not gone. They are simply waiting for the quiet mind to perceive them. The hanging gardens rise before you, terraces suspended in the night air, dripping with the scent of jasmine and myrrh. Water flows downward in delicate streams, catching starlight and forming glimmering paths of reflection. This garden, whether imagined or real, represents the human desire to touch the divine, to create beauty in defiance of mortality. You feel it as a gentle pull at your chest, an invitation to understand that creation itself is an act of dialogue between humanity and eternity. Above, the stars wheel in the sky. Babylonian astrologers once looked upward to decode messages from the gods, believing that celestial patterns mirrored human events. The constellations do not simply tell stories, they teach principles: order, chaos, cycles of growth and decline, the inevitability of change. Standing beneath them, you sense that the universe itself is a text written in symbols, waiting for the patient observer to read. As you move deeper into the city, you encounter the ziggurat, towering and solemn. Steps rise like the spine of the world, leading to a place where mortals sought the divine. Each level represents a stage of understanding, a threshold between the tangible and the transcendent. You ascend slowly, feeling your body surrender to the rhythm of the climb. With each step, your mind absorbs lessons not through logic, but through presence. The whispers of history become your own voice. In the halls of Etimanenki, you see tablets and scrolls, fragile vessels of knowledge, symbols of kings and gods, astronomical charts, sacred texts. They are not simply records. They are conduits of thought and perception, inviting you to experience wisdom firsthand. As your fingers hover over a tablet, you sense a transfer of insight. Learning here is effortless. It enters through sensation, intuition, and the quiet resonance of awareness. The city streets twist and unfold like a labyrinth of memory. Statues of deities gaze silently, their eyes hollow yet perceptive. Courtyards once filled with music and debate are now quiet pools of reflection. you wander through markets where no one sells, but everything teaches. The scent of spices, the glitter of pottery, the rhythm of imagined footsteps, all combine into a tapestry of understanding that bypasses reasoning and speaks directly to your consciousness. Night deepens, and a river of thought carries you past the remnants of libraries, theaters, and temples. Each structure embodies the rise and fall of human aspiration. You witness the impermanence of all things. Grandeur crumbles, ambitions fade, and yet the essence of inquiry persists. The Babylonians knew that civilizations are transient, that empires are illusions, and that true wisdom lies not in accumulation, but in perception. You pause at the threshold of a temple. The air is thick with the scent of incense and memory. A priestess appears, her form barely visible in the dim light. She speaks not with sound, but with the weight of insight. All empires fall, but the awareness they leave behind endures. Listen, learn, remember. Her words sink into the depths of your consciousness. You realize that you are not merely observing history, you are participating in it, feeling its currents and letting them shape your understanding. Knowledge here is holistic, immersive, and subtle. It does not demand attention, it invites it. As you drift along the riverbank, you encounter images of kings and scholars, warriors and poets. Each face, each gesture, each artifact speaks of choices, consequences, and the delicate interplay between power and responsibility. The city does not judge, it merely reflects. And in this reflection you perceive patterns, the cyclical rise and fall, the tension between creation and destruction, the eternal dialogue between action and consequence. Your breath slows. The Tigris flows endlessly, carrying fragments of history as it winds past the ruins. The whispering voice of the city merges with the rhythm of your heart. You sense that the empire is teaching a lesson, that humanity, says fate, is intertwined with awareness, that the collapse of a civilization is mirrored in the neglect of insight, that silence is the medium through which true understanding is conveyed. The night grows colder, but warmth spreads from within. Your mind, uncluttered, begins to integrate the lessons of the city. Symbols dissolve into meaning. Monuments dissolve into principles. The grandeur and decay of Babylon become a mirror for your own inner landscape. You feel the impermanence of ambition, the necessity of reflection, and the subtle power of observation. A final staircase leads you to the top of a ruined palace. From this vantage, the entire city spreads beneath you, illuminated by the soft glow of stars and the shimmer of distant fires. You understand that Babylon is not merely a place in time. It is a state of consciousness, a meditation on power, knowledge, and the fragility of meaning. The empire teaches through presence, through silence, through the patient unfolding of awareness. As you close your eyes, the city hums around you. You are at once a part of its history and a witness to its legacy. Learning in Babylon is not a process of accumulation, but of resonance, the recognition of patterns, the absorption of truth, the quiet understanding that arises when the mind surrenders to the rhythm of time. The first breath of dawn brushes your face. The stars begin to fade, but the lessons remain. You carry Babylon within you, a silent empire etched into the fabric of your consciousness. Sleep deepens, and with it, the whispers of the past guide you, shaping understanding in ways words cannot convey. And in this gentle surrender, the empire awakens inside you, not in monuments, not in wealth, but in awareness and insight in the subtle power of quiet reflection. Part 2. Whispers of the Lost. The city of Babylon fades behind you as your consciousness drifts along the currents of memory. You are no longer merely walking among ruins. You are floating through the layers of history, where every sound and shadow carries the weight of human ambition. The air hums with resonance, vibrating in tune with your own inner rhythm, guiding you deeper into the corridors of forgotten wisdom. Here, silence is not absence. It is presence magnified, an invitation to perceive beyond the surface of things. The echoes of markets, temples, and palaces intertwine with your own thoughts, creating a symphony of insight that bypasses reason and touches the soul directly. You understand without words that knowledge is not acquired. It is absorbed through attention, through quietude, through the patient alignment of mind and memory. The streets unfold before you like a labyrinth of lessons. You pass through the remnants of theaters, where actors once performed for audiences of gods and mortals alike. Every gesture, every laugh, every cry is preserved in the architecture, the light, the very air. You see a scene of a play centuries old and feel its emotional truth as if it were happening now. The city teaches you empathy, not as theory, but as lived experience. In the marketplace, dusted coins glimmer faintly under starlight. Each coin carries a story, the hopes of a merchant, the despair of a debtor, the fleeting triumph of trade. You pick up one coin, and through it you sense the interconnectedness of countless lives, the invisible threads that weave human experience into patterns that endure beyond death and decay. Civilization is revealed not as power or wealth, but as the aggregation of attention and tension and care over time. The ziggurat rises again, its steps seeming taller, steeper, yet more inviting. You climb with measured breath, each step a meditation. With each level, the lessons become subtler. Awareness of mortality, the limits of control, the necessity of humility. At the summit, the horizon opens to a vast tapestry of thought and history, stretching infinitely in all directions. Stars twinkle as if they too are reading, observing the rhythm of life below. A figure appears on the top step, a scholar draped in robes woven from shadow and starlight. He does not speak aloud, but thoughts enter your mind unbidden, phrases like ripples on a pond. The empire endures not in stone, but in consciousness. The fallen rise in the awareness of those who remember. The words sink into your mind, resonating with the quiet. You feel that learning is now an act of listening, not doing. Knowledge is transmitted in silence, in reflection, in the careful observation of patterns. The empire is teaching again, through presence, through the subtle vibrations of being. Descending the steps, you move into the gardens once suspended in air. Water trickles over terraces, catching starlight, creating an illusion of movement even in stillness. Here, the architecture of thought is visible, the integration of nature, mathematics, and human intention. The hanging gardens are a living metaphor for the harmony between effort and surrender, creation and decay. You understand that beauty is not ornamental, it is instructive. The trees whisper secrets in the language of leaves, the flowers in the scent of their blossoms. Each element of the garden conveys a principle, a hidden law of balance. The Babylonians, you realize, understood that wisdom is inseparable from the environment that nurtures it. Knowledge exists not only in texts, but in the act of living harmoniously with the world. You wander through hallways of libraries, long corridors lined with clay tablets and scrolls. Words float from their surfaces in golden light, drifting toward you like moths to flame. They settle on your mind effortlessly, integrating into understanding without coercion. Here, history is not a record, but a living conversation, an exchange between the observer and the observed. The city itself speaks, and you are both listener and participant. In one chamber, the walls display astronomical charts, diagrams of the heavens traced by careful hands centuries ago. The constellations are coded with lessons on cycles of rise and fall, on timing and alignment, on the impermanence of empires and the persistence of insight. You perceive that civilization is not static. It is a dynamic organism, a reflection of patterns that repeat across ages and cultures. As night deepens, the air grows cooler, tinged with incense and memory. You enter a temple where silence is so thick it becomes tactile. A priestess approaches, her gaze steady yet not invasive. Her presence communicates understanding, not authority. She guides you to kneel, not in worship, but in attention. In stillness, she transmits insight. All that is built will fade, but the awareness it fosters can endure. Every choice, every action, every thought leaves traces beyond the physical. The realization settles in your mind. The fall of an empire is not merely destruction, it is transformation. The structures may crumble, the rulers may vanish, but the principles, the lessons, the echoes of human consciousness persist. They reside in those who listen, who observe, who engage with the world with awareness. You leave the temple and wander into the night streets. Lamps long extinguished cast shadows that are alive with memory. You feel the pulse of past lives, of countless decisions, of human striving. The empire's silence is instructive. It tells you that meaning is not in accumulation, but in presence, not in power, but in understanding, not in noise, but in quiet. Crossing the river, you pause on a bridge whose arches are cracked but enduring. Beneath the water, reflections of stars mingle with the shapes of forgotten ships. You recognize that even flowing water is a teacher. It moves without resistance, shapes the world gently, and reminds you that persistence is not the same as force. Civilization can learn from nature's rhythms, to bend, to endure, to observe. The wanderer's mind grows heavy with insight. Lessons are no longer external, they are internalized. The history of Babylon is not a story to be read, but a living map for consciousness. Each ruined building, each deserted square, each silent temple communicates an understanding of impermanence, attention, and reflection. In the distance, the ziggurat glows faintly in moonlight. You ascend once more, this time without thought, guided by intuition. At the summit, you look outward and see not only Babylon, but a panorama of civilizations, past and future, their patterns reflected in one another. The rise and fall, the creation and decay, the dance of silence and noise, all of it becomes clear. The city whispers one last lesson before sleep envelops you. Observe without possession, learn without judgment, remember without clinging. You lie beneath the stars, the air cool against your skin. Your mind drifts, carrying the accumulated insights of the empire. History is no longer distant. It flows through you, as intimate as your heartbeat, as essential as your breath. You understand that learning in silence is learning in truth, and as sleep deepens, you merge with the city, with the river, with the gardens, with the ziggurat itself. The empire is not lost. It resides in awareness, in attention, in the quiet mind that listens. The night stretches infinitely, but you are content. Knowledge has been imparted without urgency, without demand, in the purest form. Experience absorbed through presence. You are part of the silent empire, both witness and participant, bearer of lessons carried across millennia. The Tigris flows quietly beneath the moonlight. You close your eyes, surrendering to the night, letting the whispers guide you into deeper understanding. The empire teaches still, and you listen. Part 3. Echoes of impermanence. The morning does not arrive with a bang, but as a subtle shift in perception. Light filters through the ruins of Babylon, brushing over cracked walls, broken columns, and the once mighty gates now silent. The city does not awaken, it resonates. Each shadow, each reflection carries the weight of history, speaking to those willing to listen, to observe without judgment, to understand without imposition. The wanderer steps lightly across the courtyards. The ground beneath is uneven, littered with remnants of lives once lived, fragments of pottery, scattered inscriptions, faint outlines of paintings now faded. Yet in each fragment there is knowledge, in each imperfection a story. Civilization, you realize, is not defined by its triumphs alone, but by the silent record of its decay, by the delicate balance between presence and absence. In the central square, statues stand frozen. Kings and gods, heroes and scholars, all etched in stone, eternal and immobile. Their faces gaze outward, yet seem to peer inward, challenging you to discern the lessons hidden within their permanence. You understand that the empire teaches through contrast, the grandeur of ambition set against the inevitability of decay, the fleeting triumph of power against the persistence of consequence. You wander past the ziggurat, its height still commanding, steps worn smooth by countless ascents. Each level is a meditation in itself, a threshold between understanding and transcendence. Ascending, you feel the pull of reflection, the necessity of humility. Above, the sky stretches infinitely, constellations spinning slowly, indifferent yet instructive. The stars are not mere decoration, they are mnemonic devices, celestial guides reminding those who pay attention of cycles, patterns, and impermanence. In a library long abandoned, clay tablets rest in silent rows. Symbols etched millennia ago still speak. You do not read them with eyes alone, you feel them with consciousness. The Babylonians encoded not only events but philosophies, not only observations but ethical reasoning, not only knowledge but a method of absorption that transcends spoken language. Here, learning is experiential. The mind becomes a receptacle for resonance rather than a vessel for facts. Water flows quietly from a ruined fountain, droplets catching the early sun and refracting it into fleeting spectrums of color. You pause, noticing the rhythm. There is a lesson in flow. Resistance yields to persistence. Transience is not loss, but transformation. Clarity emerges when the mind mirrors the patience of nature. Civilization is mirrored in these flows, Every rise and fall, every construction and collapse is reflected in the subtleties of motion, in the patterns that persist beyond the apparent chaos. The marketplace, though empty, pulses with memory. Imagine the voices of merchants, the laughter of children, the negotiations of trade. You do not hear them, you sense them. The city hums with what was, what is, and what might yet be. Understanding emerges in these echoes and the overlap of absence and attention. You recognize that the empire's collapse was not destruction alone. It was an invitation to perceive what endures beyond materiality. The priestess appears once more, silent, guiding without words. Her presence conveys that wisdom is not authority, and learning is not coercion. She gestures toward a mural, faint and peeling, depicting the creation of Babylon, the rise of kings, the deliberations of councils. You understand that history is layered, and its lessons require immersion. Knowledge is contextual. Insight emerges when observation meets reflection, when participation yields understanding. You move through a courtyard where statues of lions stand guard, their forms eroded but proud. Lions are symbols of vigilance and strength, yet here they remind you of impermanence. Even the fiercest guardians cannot preserve all. The empire's true endurance lies not in strength, but in awareness, in the capacity to notice, to reflect, to integrate the lessons of each rise and fall into consciousness. In a temple chamber, incense still lingers in the air, mingling with dust and memory. You kneel, not in worship, but in contemplation. Thoughts arise naturally, unforced, like rivers finding their course. The empire's collapse teaches patience, that understanding cannot be hurried, that insight grows in silence, and that the mind, when still, perceives patterns invisible to the clamor of ambition. The wanderer pauses by a canal, water reflecting the remnants of aqueducts and bridges. You sense the ingenuity of those who built these structures, not merely for utility, but as demonstrations of interconnectedness. Every architectural choice, every material selected, every technique employed reflects a philosophy, a worldview, an awareness of balance. Civilization, in this sense, is a dialogue between intention and environment, a reflection of consciousness imposed on reality. As night approaches, you rest on the steps of the ziggurat, gazing at the horizon. Shadows lengthen, merging ruins with landscape. You feel the weight of impermanence, the inevitability of decay, and yet a quiet thrill of understanding. The empire teaches resilience not in its physicality, but in the persistence of principles, the endurance of observation, the subtle accumulation of awareness that transcends collapse. In dreams, you traverse avenues of memory and imagination, crossing thresholds of time and space. Lessons are imparted not through explanation, but through experience. The rise and fall of kings, the fleeting beauty of gardens, the transient joy of marketplaces. Insight emerges organically, embedded in rhythm, pattern, and resonance. You are not a student. You are a participant in the ongoing dialogue of history. The Tigris hums beneath the moonlight, carrying whispers of past lives downstream. You listen, and the river's continuity mirrors the persistence of knowledge. The empire, though physically fallen, persists in attention, in reflection, in the silent act of perceiving. The ruins are a teacher, the night is a mentor, the self is a vessel of absorption. You awaken, not fully, but on the edge of consciousness, carrying fragments of insight. Every image, every sound, every whispered lesson integrates subtly, creating a framework of understanding that will guide thought, perception, and reflection. Knowledge has been imparted without compulsion. Insight has been transferred without instruction. The Empire's voice resonates in the quiet, and as you drift back into sleep, the city's hum becomes your own heartbeat. The stars above reflecting in your inner vision. Civilization, though fallen, continues to teach. It speaks through silence, through decay, through the attentive mind willing to notice, willing to listen, willing to absorb. In this way, the Empire is eternal, not in monuments or rulers, but in the persistence of consciousness that perceives, reflects, and integrates. You are both witness and participant, both student and teacher, both observer and observed. The night deepens further, and the city folds itself into the mind of the wanderer. Insight blooms in shadow, patterns of rise and fall, creation and decay, ambition and reflection interweave seamlessly. The lessons are subtle but profound. Attention is power, stillness is clarity, and presence is immortality. And in this delicate balance you realize the silent empire endures, not in stone, not in titles, not in wealth, but in the subtle, quiet resonance of understanding carried forward by those who choose to listen. Part 4. Shadows of Forgotten Cities. The city lay beneath a veil of twilight, neither fully illuminated nor completely dark, suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch infinitely. Buildings stood like skeletal witnesses to ambition and despair. The wind whispered through hollowed streets, carrying the faint scent of earth and decay. Every corner, every archway, every cracked stone breathed stories of lives long past, resonating with a quiet, profound urgency. In the central square, the remnants of a fountain gaped open, its basin dry, but memory flowed like water through its stone veins. You knelt by its edge, feeling the pulse of history under your fingertips. Lessons were encoded not in inscriptions or texts alone, but in the very geometry of space, the curvature of archways, the subtle alignment of stones. The city itself was a living manuscript, its narrative etched in the tactile and the ephemeral. You wandered through the marketplaces, once bustling with trade, now silent. Stalls bore the faint impressions of commerce, coins imprinted in dust, wooden crates decayed to splinters, shadows suggesting movement that no longer existed. Each artifact, each space, was imbued with intention, a reminder that civilization is the cumulative manifestation of countless human decisions. You sensed that observing these traces without judgment revealed not merely history, but the inner logic of humanity itself. The ziggurat loomed, towering and solemn, its steps fractured yet inviting. Ascending, you felt the rhythm of reflection deepen with each level. The top offered not just a view of the physical landscape, but an elevated perspective on human thought. The interplay of power and morality, ambition and humility, creation and destruction. The empire, though fallen, taught through the architecture of awareness, inviting you to perceive patterns that endure beyond physical form. In the temple chambers, frescoes and carvings glimmered faintly in the ambient light. Priests and priestesses, kings and warriors, deities and mortals, all were depicted in scenes of triumph, negotiation, ritual, and contemplation. You notice subtle motifs, circles of reflection, repeated gestures, alignment with celestial phenomena. The These were not merely art. They were pedagogical instruments, transmitting knowledge through observation, intuition, and resonance rather than written instruction. The gardens were a sanctuary of instruction. Terraces, once lush with greenery and cascading water, offered a model of deliberate harmony. Plants were arranged according to principles of geometry and balance. Streams of water followed paths designed for sound and motion, and scents were layered to evoke contemplation. Each sensory input was a lesson, a channel through which understanding could be absorbed unconsciously. The empire taught through experience, demonstrating that wisdom is inseparable from the environments that cultivate it. You followed narrow corridors into the libraries, where clay tablets and scrolls lay undisturbed. Words floated subtly in the mind, not read, but felt. Knowledge entered consciousness as vibration, pattern, and image. Here, the line between observer and text blurred. Learning was not reception, but resonance. Each artifact imparted insight not only about the world outside, but about the architecture of thought itself, the logic of impermanence, and the necessity of reflective attention. Night deepened, and the city revealed its shadowed truths. Buildings, eroded by time, became mirrors for the inner landscape of human aspiration and failure. In this stillness, you perceived the cycles of empires, the rise driven by vision, the apex marked by excess, the inevitable collapse tempered by decay. Power is ephemeral. Attention is enduring. Civilization, when observed in this light, is less a monument to dominance than a repository of awareness. The river Tigris carried faint echoes of the past, voices, music, laughter, sorrow, all intertwined in the flow of water. You knelt by its edge, letting the current wash over your perception. Here, insight was fluid. Patterns emerged, not rigidly, but in motion. Every rise and fall, every creation and destruction, every triumph and failure was absorbed in the rhythm of the river, teaching that permanence is illusion, and understanding resides in recognition rather than possession. Through the empty streets, statues of lions and kings loomed, worn by wind and time. Their presence conveyed a dual lesson. Strength and vigilance are fleeting, yet the awareness they engender persists. You sense that history is transmitted not only in materiality, but in perception, in the capacity of attentive beings to absorb and reflect on the consequences of action and inaction. The silent empire endures in cognition, in reflection, in the subtle transmission of wisdom to those prepared to receive it. You entered a temple where the scent of incense lingered faintly. A priestess appeared, her presence commanding yet gentle. She gestured toward inscriptions on the walls, depicting cycles of creation and decay. Thoughts entered your mind directly. The empire teaches not by preservation alone, but by memory. Observe the rise and fall, the symmetry of success and failure, and recognize the permanence of awareness over matter. Her guidance resonated deeply. You understood that collapse was not the cessation of learning, but the transition to a subtler form. Structures crumble, rulers vanish, and commerce fades, yet the knowledge embedded in spaces, objects, and patterns persists. The empire instructs through patience, through attentive presence, through the unbroken chain of perception linking past and future. The wanderer rested by a canal, tracing reflections of broken aqueducts and empty bridges. You observed that even in imperfection there is order, and in decay there is design. Nature, in its reclamation of the city, demonstrated principles parallel to those of thought, adaptability, resilience, continuity. Civilization, like water and wind, flows, reshapes, and leaves marks that inform those who are observant. As the night matured, you climbed once more to the apex of the ziggurat. Below, the ruins sprawled, a complex lattice of intention, memory, and consequence. You felt the gravity of impermanence, yet also the persistent thread of awareness. The empire, though physically fallen, continued to teach. Its lessons are subtle, layered, and inseparable from silence. Every detail, every shadow, every whisper contributes to understanding if one listens attentively. You close your eyes, letting the patterns integrate. Dreams carried you through corridors of thought, across plazas of memory, into chambers where philosophy and history intertwined seamlessly. Insight was not delivered, it emerged, a natural consequence of immersion, observation, and resonance. The city, the river, the gardens, the ruins, they were all instruments of learning, conduits through which consciousness could absorb wisdom effortlessly. The Tigris, glimmering under moonlight, became a river of understanding, flowing through mind and body. You sensed that even after collapse, civilizations endure in those who pay attention, in those who perceive, in those who integrate subtle lessons into the structure of consciousness. Knowledge, like water, adapts and continues to nourish receptive minds. You realize that the empire's silence was not emptiness, but fullness. In stillness, patterns of rise and fall, of creation and decay, of ambition and reflection became apparent. Awareness persists where monuments cannot. Consciousness endures where stone erodes. The silent empire is eternal, not in material form, but in the subtle, attentive mind that listens, perceives, and integrates its lessons. Night passed, the city and river folding seamlessly into your inner awareness. The hum of history became indistinguishable from the rhythm of your own breath. Civilization teaches not through coercion, not through spectacle, but through the quiet persistence of reflection and observation. You lie beneath the stars, immersed in lessons that are subtle, profound, and eternal. The empire's voice is not loud, yet it is constant. You have learned to hear it. Part 5. The Eternal Resonance. The city, now fully immersed in the quiet embrace of night, exudes a presence beyond its physicality. Ruins no longer merely signify decay. They are symbols, vessels for the enduring pulse of consciousness. Every stone, every arch, every whisper of wind carries the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. You walk slowly, aware that you are not simply traversing space, but moving through layers of understanding. The Tigris glimmers faintly under the celestial canvas, a mirror of thought and memory. Water moves with deliberate serenity, reflecting constellations whose patterns have guided civilizations for millennia. In each ripple, you perceive the duality of permanence and impermanence. The river persists, yet its waters are never the same. The city teaches that time is both river and reflection, continuity and transformation. You wander through the deserted gardens once suspended above the city. Each terrace, each plant, each drop of water is meticulously orchestrated, not merely for aesthetics, but as a teaching instrument. Geometry, symmetry, and rhythm converge here, forming a language beyond words. You sense that every living element is a lesson, conveying principles of balance, patience, and harmony. Knowledge knowledge flows not through lectures, but through direct experience, through the subtle alignment of perception with the environment. In the market square, shadows of human activity linger as echoes. You hear faint laughter, the call of a distant merchant, the soft footfalls of a child. These are not hallucinations. They are imprints of energy and attention that remain after the empire's collapse. You realize that civilizations leave traces not just in material constructs, but in consciousness itself. The silent empire endures in the attentive mind, in those who perceive and integrate its lessons. The ziggurat stands sentinel, commanding yet serene. Ascending its steps, you sense the layered wisdom of its builders. Each level represents a stage of understanding. The earliest steps invite observation. The middle steps encourage reflection. The summit imparts transcendence. Here, architecture is pedagogy. Movement becomes meditation. Ascent is transformation. You reach the pinnacle and gaze across the expanse of Babylon, understanding that physical elevation mirrors cognitive and spiritual elevation. In a temple chamber, the walls shimmer with faint inscriptions. Priests and priestesses, long gone, left encoded lessons for those who could perceive beyond words. Symbols float before your eyes, integrating into consciousness. Knowledge here is absorbed passively yet profoundly. The empire communicates not by force, but by resonance, cultivating the ability to understand through presence, attention, and reflection. The statues lining the streets, though weathered and fractured, remain potent symbols. Lions, kings, deities, they no longer command in the traditional sense, yet they teach. Strength, vigilance, ambition, and wisdom are recorded in form, reminding observers that while material power is transient, the principles it embodies persist. Awareness, not ownership, becomes the true measure of endurance. You traverse corridors of abandoned libraries, where tablets and scrolls float like luminous specters. Words and symbols do not merely convey information, they radiate intention. The Babylonians understood the impermanence of objects and the permanence of consciousness. Knowledge, when engaged attentively, becomes a living entity. It molds thought, refines perception, and invites reflection. The city itself becomes a teacher, its silence a medium of instruction. By the riverbank, you meditate, letting the water's rhythm resonate within. Each wave carries history, triumph and failure, creation and destruction, order and chaos. The river teaches adaptability. Civilization, like water, shapes itself to circumstance, yet leaves enduring traces. Observation and patience are paramount. Insight cannot be forced, only absorbed in alignment with the natural flow of awareness. Night deepens, stars glimmer, and the moon casts silver reflections on broken stone and still waters. The empire's silence becomes a symphony, each ruin a note, each shadow a subtle vibration of meaning. You sense that understanding is not about accumulation of facts, but attunement to patterns, both seen and unseen. Learning is not acquisition, it is resonance, a synchronization with the enduring pulse of consciousness that transcends time. You encounter a temple where incense still lingers, thick with memory. A priestess appears, her gaze both gentle and penetrating. Without speaking, she transmits a final lesson. All empires rise and fall. Matter crumbles. Power dissipates. Yet the wisdom embedded in conscious observation endures. Attend, reflect, and integrate, for in this lies immortality. Her presence fades, leaving only a profound stillness. You walk through the city, absorbing the quiet lessons encoded in its architecture, gardens, waterways, and ruins. Every step, every breath, every glance is a meditation on impermanence, awareness, and resilience. The Silent Empire teaches that understanding persists beyond collapse, that awareness is more enduring than monuments, and that reflection is a form of immortality. You rest upon the highest terrace, gazing across the expanse of Babylon and beyond. Patterns of rise and fall, creation and decay, ambition and humility intertwine seamlessly. The Empire's teachings are subtle, layered, and comprehensive. Strength must be tempered by observation, achievement by reflection, and ambition by awareness. The cycles of history are mirrored in consciousness, and insight emerges in the attentive mind. The Tigris murmurs, carrying stories of countless generations downstream. You perceive the interconnectivity of all things. Individual choices ripple through time, shaping outcomes in ways both seen and unseen. Civilization is a dialogue, ongoing, resilient, transmitted not only through artifacts, but through those who observe and integrate its lessons. Awareness is the vessel of immortality, perception the medium through which wisdom endures. The gardens, once vibrant with life, now whisper softly in the night. Flowers and water, stones and trees all contribute to the pedagogy of the empire. The sensory environment becomes inseparable from understanding, each element a facilitator of reflection. You learn through observation, through intuition, through the quiet attention of mind and body, aligned with the rhythms of nature and history. Night stretches indefinitely, yet you feel no fatigue. Insight flows naturally, integrating experiences, reflections, and subtle lessons. You realize that the Empire's collapse is not tragedy, but continuity, a transition from external dominance to internal resonance, from material permanence to cognitive endurance. The Silent Empire persists in consciousness, in those willing to listen, reflect, and integrate its wisdom. Finally, you lie beneath the stars, the city and river folding seamlessly into your inner world. Every whisper, shadow, and memory is absorbed, forming a mosaic of understanding that transcends time and matter. The lessons of Babylon, once silent and distant, are now intimate and living within you. Civilization teaches in stillness, instructs through reflection, and endures in the attentive mind. The Empire has imparted its ultimate truth. Impermanence is inevitable, awareness is eternal, and wisdom is the subtle resonance that persists beyond the ephemeral. You drift into deep, untroubled sleep, carrying with you the echoes of a civilization that, though fallen, endures in consciousness, in reflection, in the quiet power of observation. And in that sleep, the Silent Empire speaks, teaches, and resonates eternally.